Same thing goes with Michelle, right? If Michelle is to write a brief on a case as a lawyer, she is, right? She's a professional lawyer, as we can put it. If she's to write a brief on a case to send to her boss, right? The criteria her boss will use to evaluate the brief she has written will be different from it to be different from what her boss will use to evaluate someone like me. Maybe I'm just a passerby, and maybe I was in court that day, and maybe her boss was okay. Let me just hear and let me hear his third opinion on. Sorry, excuse me, please. All right, sorry. Yeah. So the criteria Michelle's boss will use to evaluate the quality of our work will be different from the criteria he's going to use to evaluate the report or the brief I sent to him as maybe an eyewitness, right? And what we're trying to talk about today is when we elicit our requirements and we document these requirements, we need to ensure that the requirement we are documenting or specifying is of quality, right? It has a quality attribute to it. That's because whoever that will be evaluating or reviewing our work, maybe our supervisor or whoever or our team lead, would ensure that we are not delivering a work that's a roadside person or an outsider can just write in their sleep. So that is why, as business analysts, we need to consider requirement attributes, characteristics of a good requirement, attributes of a good requirement. What does it mean to write a good requirement? And that is what we're going to be looking at today. The requirement attributes, and then the other side of the class today, we also look at different documentation formats that we have. We're going to look at two documentation formats today, the BRD, which is business requirement documents, and the FRD, which is functional requirement document. Look at those two, a sample of those two today. Then, as class next week, we'll look at use case specification. Following, we'll also look at user stories and epics. So these are the different documentation formats we have in business analysis. So let's take a look, starting first at looking at the requirement attributes. So let me know when you can see my screen, and then we can start. So let me know if you can see my screen. Requirement prioritization, attributes, and documentation formats.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Michelle, how about you? Is Michelle with us?
Yes, I'm here. I can see it.
All right, awesome. So first, let's look at prioritizing of requirements, right? Prioritizing of the requirements. You know, last week or last 2 weeks, we looked at business analysis, planning, and monitoring. And we talked about, we pointed out planning, business analysis, governance, where we looked at who should participate in prioritization, who should make a decision on prioritization and all of that. So let's look at requirement prioritization. How do we prioritize requirements, which is part of the attribute of a good requirement that is well written. Prioritization basically is the act of ranking requirements to determine their relative importance to stakeholders. It's not a matter of ranking requirement because we want to rank requirement or we feel this should come first or not. We basically rank them in the order of relative importance to stakeholders. And that's because Why do we need to rank them in relation to what stakeholders value, right? That is because the solution we are working on is supposed to deliver value to stakeholders. And value is anything that is important or it is what that has a worth to stakeholders. So whatever thing we need to build and when we need to build it needs to come in order of that value to stakeholders. And that is how we prioritize requirements. There are different factors that influence, or should I say, affect our prioritization. Number one, it could be benefits. We might want to prioritize a requirement based on the business value we're going to get out of it, maybe revenue we're going to get if we should implement, let's say, for instance, we want to, there's this popular stuff that happened in e-commerce. We call it Black Friday, right? I don't know if you guys are aware of Black Friday. So Black Friday happens every November. Some e-commerce platforms do every Fridays in November, or the last Friday in November, or second Friday, depending, right? It all varies. Before it was usually the last Friday in November, but now they do it every Friday in November. So they call it Black Friday. And it's a period in time where you get huge discounts off anything you are buying on their platform, right? Now, if we are building an e-commerce platform and we want to cash in on that Black Friday, assuming there's a feature, a Black Friday feature that we need to implement, or there's a Black Friday feature we need to implement in our e-commerce before Black Friday starts, or before we get to Black Friday. If we find ourselves in late September, early October, it will be important that we ensure we prioritize that particular feature because of the benefit we will get, in the sense that if that feature is available and our customers are able to cash in on Black Friday deals, it means we are going to generate a lot of revenue, or should I say, generate a lot of sales as a result of Black Friday. So sometimes we prioritize based on benefits, the business benefits that we might get as a result of implementing that feature or building that solution. Another factor that influences prioritization is penalty, right? In late 2020, early 2021, there was this policy by the federal government of Nigeria that instructed all financial institutions not to carry out transactions between the Naira and cryptocurrency. So it was more or less like a cryptocurrency ban, right, in Nigeria. Now, platforms like Binance, Patricia, Luna, Luno, and all of that does cryptocurrency conversions into Naira and also trading of cryptocurrencies. They had to see how they had to prioritize the implementation of the removal of that ability to convert or trade cryptocurrency with the Naira in order for them not to be penalized by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So in that scenario, a business analyst or a product owner in that organization or the organization itself will prioritize the feature of removing that particular doing that particular implementation over every other thing they're doing, because they're prioritizing based on penalty. If they don't meet up with time, they'll be penalized, they'll be fined, or their license might be revoked, right? So that is it. Some of the factors that affect prioritization could be benefits, could be penalty. Another one could be costs. If we look at the costs of doing things, maybe we have 5 things to do, and maybe in our investments, in our cash runway or investment runway, we have just 10 million Naira. That's what we have. And that 10 million Naira, we have 3 projects to do. We plan to do. Project A will cost us 3 million Naira. Project B will cost us 5 million Naira. But Project D will cost us 8 million naira. So because of the fact that Project D will cost us more, and we might not be able to afford Project D, even though we like Project D, but we don't have the money to satisfy Project D, we'll end up prioritizing Project A and Project B ahead of Project C. So sometimes prioritization is influenced by costs. Another thing is that prioritization could be influenced by risk. If the organization is not risk accepting, if they are risk averse, they will want to prioritize everything they are doing based on risk. So the project or initiative that is less risky, they will want to embark on those initiatives. The ones that are very risky, they will not embark on those ones. These are some of the factors that will influence how we prioritize things, even as business analysts or as an organization. Another factor that influences prioritization is dependencies. What do I mean by dependencies? If you wake up in the morning and you need to rush out, you need to go out to go and jog, right? You want to jog early in the morning. If you realize that your sneakers are wet and not, they're not fit to run, you realize that due to that dependency, okay, let me give an instance. So when you wake up in the morning, assuming your routine is you wake up, you jog for 30 minutes within your environment. After jogging, you take your baths, that you refresh, and then you go prepare your breakfast. Assuming this is your routine in the morning. Now, you wake up one morning and realize that you forgot your sneakers outside. You did not bring them inside. As long as the wears you use, your sporting wears you use in jogging, you forgot them outside, and it rained heavily, and they are so wet. And then you wake up in the morning and you want to go and jog. And then you realize that you can't jog because of the fact that your sneakers and all of your sporting materials are not in a good condition. You will see that you will deprioritize jogging for that day. And then you end up prioritizing taking your bath and going to have your breakfast. So sometimes dependencies could affect our prioritization. Another instance is this. If we are to do A, B, C, and D, right? And we do A, we do B, and we will feel like we must actually do C, right? But we realize that we can't go ahead to do C. We can't go ahead to do D if C has not been completed. So which means that D is dependent on C. Because D is dependent on C, we will prioritize the implementation of C ahead of D. So sometimes dependencies could be a reason or a factor that influences how we prioritize requirements or how we prioritize initiative or how we prioritize things at work. Another factor is time. When we put timing consideration into things, maybe the time it will take us, maybe we are trying to aim for the markets. A good example is Easter period, or let's say December period. You want to start up a poultry business, right? A poultry business. And you are aiming, you know that by December, that is when there will be a high demand on poultry birds from people, because people want to buy fowl, chicken, and all of that to eat and celebrate Christmas in December. Now, if you set up your poultry farm and the time that it will take for your fowl or your chicken, whatever, to mature to the stage of actually selling them in the market, if that time would exceed December and if the time fall into February, you realize that you might not actually get the needed revenue that you need. So because of that, as a result of the fact that you are trying to consider timing as it relates to markets, right? You might want to prioritize the setting up of that poultry farm at this moment so that you can have like 6 months. I don't know I may not really know the duration it takes for birds to go from chick to chicken, right? You might want to prioritize whatever thing you are doing in order for you to meet up with the timing consideration as a factor for that particular initiative. Another factor that influences prioritization is stability. Stability. What this means is this. Sometimes systems could be unstable. And what I mean by unstable could be today is working, tomorrow is not working. Mr. A uses it and is working today. Mr. B will also use it today and it's not working as well. And maybe there's mistakes, there's error. So because of that instability in the system, even though we are planning to implement another feature, maybe we want to implement a very lovely feature that customers say they like and they want, but we are experiencing a lot of instability in our system. Because of the fact that there's instability in our system, we will prioritize any project or initiative that will help us to resolve our instability issues so that our system becomes stable. And we will prioritize any initiative that will help us achieve that over the new feature we want to deliver. So sometimes stability might be a reason why we prioritize, or could be a factor that influences our prioritization for a particular piece of work. And the last one is regulatory compliance. Regulatory compliance. So, for instance, the Central Bank of Nigeria, I think last year, said that the naira the old naira notes will no longer be in circulation. I think it was 10th or 14th of February, if I'm not wrong, right? That's when it will stop being in circulation, and has instructed all financial institutions and all of that to comply to this policy, whereby stop receiving or issuing the old naira notes on that particular day. Now, it will be important that every financial institution prioritize everything they need to do, whether it is related to implementation of a system or processes or whatever, to ensure that they are compliant to regulatory requirements. So sometimes we might prioritize what we need to do as a result of the fact that we want to be compliant to regulatory policies or regulatory requirements. So there are different techniques we can use to prioritize our requirement. But before we go into that, I don't know if there's any question on factors that influence prioritization. I don't know if you have any question.
From my hand, there is no question. Everything is clear to me. Thank you for that wonderful presentation.
Misha, do you have any question? Hello, Mitchell. All right. Let's go ahead. Thanks, Ahmad. So, prioritization technique. There are different techniques we use in prioritizing requirements, right? And we'll be looking at these three most common techniques that we use in business analysis to prioritize requirements. Number one is the Morse code technique. And as the spelling of this Morse code goes, we have the M as capital, the M as uppercase, S uppercase, C uppercase, and W uppercase. And they represent the M for must have, S for should have, C for could have, and W for won't have. And that is what the Morse code prioritization technique talks about, looking at prioritization on the basis of things that we must have on the system, things we should have, things we must implement, things we should implement, things we could implement, and things we will not, or things we won't implement. That is how the Morse code prioritization technique approaches prioritization. So let's take a look at it in detail. First, the must-haves. The must-haves are basically features that must be included or implemented before we can actually launch the product or before customers can start using the product. For instance, if you do not implement an onboarding, or should I say registration or account creation or sign up feature, or you do not implement a login feature on the app, on the software, on the solution before you launch, there's no way customers are going to log in or sign up to use your system or to use your application or to use your products. So things like sign up can be considered as a must-have features. So if you are prioritizing the features for the application that we need to implement, a sign-up feature will fall under the must-have category of what we need to do. Then we should have are basically features that are not critical for launch, but are also considered to be important and also considered to be of high value to the users. So a feature that if we don't implement it before we launch, users can still use our product to get value. But it is important for us to have those features so that we can give them a better experience, so that they can actually get the best value from their work. Let me give an instance to you. So when WhatsApp first launched, when they first launched WhatsApp, I want to get a yes or no from us. When WhatsApp first launched around, if I'm not mistaken, around 2011, 2011, 2010, 2009/2012. Within this period, that was when WhatsApp first launched. Now, when WhatsApp first launched, I'd like to know from you, was the capability to make voice calls available on WhatsApp? Yes or no?
Not at all.
It wasn't available, right?
Yeah.
But as time went on, they introduced voice call, right?
Yes.
Now, when there was no voice call, we were all were we not enjoying WhatsApp?
We were.
We are enjoying it to send messages to each other, chats, creating group chats, and all of that. And we felt like we've seen that. We felt like this is all we could have. This is all we need from a messaging app like WhatsApp. We don't need anything extra. Well, along the line, they introduced voice call. I was like, wow, this is a whole new level, right? That means I don't need to keep on buying airtime for me to make a call. I can actually make a call through WhatsApp without buying airtime and then utilizing my data bundle, right? And we felt like, oh, this is wow. Then they went on to implement the video call. I was like, wow. So that means not just hearing the voice of a loved one, I can actually see their face, even though they are far away from me, they're kilometers or miles away from me, I can actually see their face and hear their voice, right? From the comfort of my home. Now, we felt like that was all. And now they went on to implement group voice call, whereby it's not just about you making a call to one person, you can actually make a call to about 4 or 6 persons, right? And like, wow, instead of thinking of when we'll have reunion to hear each other's voice, right? Or maybe if you want to discuss something as a group and make a decision, or want to have a brief meeting online, instead of going to subscribe for Zoom or the likes, I can actually do that on WhatsApp. And this is nice. So it's an added value to us. What I'm trying to explain to you is that for WhatsApp, when WhatsApp was launching, chat messaging was a must-have for them. It was a must-have requirement. They must implement chat messaging. If not, there will be no value that people will get. People might not even get value from the products. But as they continue, they started implementing other should-have requirements, things that will be important to users like you and I, and also give us value, like the voice call, like the video call, right? So should-have requirements are requirements that if we don't have them, we can actually launch, we can actually go commercial. But we need them to be some sort of an added value to customers for using our products and services. These are considered the should have requirements. This is how we prioritize should have requirements. Then we have the could have. The could have requirements are requirements we consider to be delighters. What do I mean by delighters? You can agree with me that there was a time on Facebook when you type congratulations, nothing happens. Like if you're commenting congratulations on someone's post, maybe a friend posts a birthday, or they post that they got a job, or they post that they just got married, or they got engaged, and you want to just, congratulate the person. Say congratulations on your wedding, or congratulations on your wedding anniversary, congratulations on your birthday, or congratulations on buying a new car, what's the thing? You agree with me that the time that you will say congratulations and nothing will happen, the congratulations will just be typed there. Or at some point in time, there was something that Facebook implemented that once you type congrats or congratulations, there will be some sort of balloon effect popping. I don't know if you experienced it. Anyone? Let me know if you experienced that on Facebook.
Yes, it is there. The feature is there.
There will be some. What about you, Michelle? I don't know if you do Facebook or if you've experienced that on Facebook.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So you see some sort of balloon effects, even to the point that sometimes when you type congratulations, that congratulations will have a red font color, right? Other things might have black color. That is other text that you've written. Comment that you've written might have black, but congratulations will be bold and it will have a red color. These things are called, or they are considered to be the could have requirements. And we consider them to be delighters. Not that they're adding value to customer, but just to delight them, to give them like a wow, see what just happened, right? We call them delighter features or delighter requirements. These are the kind of requirements we consider to be a could have, because these are features that are not critical to the launch, right? But they delight the customers. They are not important. Like if you don't have them at all, customers will still get a lot of value using Facebook. But it's just to delight the customers. That is what we call the could have features when we are prioritizing. And then the would have are basically features that have been requested but are explicitly excluded from scope during the plan duration. I may be included or may not be included at any point in time. So these are features that we are not going to be considering for implementation. Maybe because it will stretch our budget and we don't have that budget flexibility or elasticity to accommodate such features. These are considered to be the won't have requirements. So the next type of requirement prioritization technique we'll be looking at is Eisenhower decision metrics. Eisenhower decision metrics is another common or popular way we prioritize requirements today. The likes of Jira and Azure DevOps. So Jira is a tool that we use to manage requirements as business analysts. Like we use it to write user stories, accept task criteria, assign priority to requirements and all of that, right? Same thing with Azure DevOps. We use it to manage requirements. So Jira and Azure DevOps leverages on the Eisenhower decision metrics in determining prioritization for a particular requirement. So Jira uses priority as low priority, medium priority, high priority, highest priority, lowest priority. That is how Jira prioritizes requirements. Why Azure DevOps prioritizes requirements with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 being the highest priority, 2 being a high priority, 3 being a medium priority, 4 being a low priority, and 5 being the lowest priority. That is how Azure DevOps prioritizes requirements. While Jira prioritizes requirements as highest, high, medium, low, and lowest. So they basically leverage the Eisenhower decision metrics in their prioritization metrics. And what this Eisenhower decision metric does is it helps us to prioritize based on urgency and importance. So if the requirement is urgent, very urgent and it is important, very important, we assign it a high priority or a priority of 1. If the requirement is not so urgent, but is important, we assign it a medium priority. So it is not so urgent, but it's important for us to do this. We give it a medium priority. If the requirement is not so urgent and it is not so important, we give it a low priority or a lowest priority. So this is the way we kind of prioritize requirements using the Eisenhower decision matrix. We prioritize based on this requirement. Is it very urgent and very important? If it is very urgent and it's very important, we give it a very high priority, or we give it a 1. If it is not so urgent but it is very important, right? We give it a priority of 2, or sometimes a priority of 3, and then, or we can give it a priority of medium. So that is how we use the Eisenhower decision matrix in prioritizing requirements. Another prioritization technique that is also used, but it's not as common as Moscow and Eisenhower decision matrix, is a time boxing. For time boxing, there are 3 different scenarios that we consider when we are doing time boxing technique. Number 1, we can choose to use the all-in, or we use the all-out, or we use the selective approach. These are the 3 different approaches to time boxing. For the all-in, it means we include all the requirements that are necessary for the solution to be developed, and then we remove or postpone the requirements whose implementation will cause the project to miss its deadline. Let me give an example for us so that we can make it be much more relatable to us. Assuming if I'm an orange seller, right? I sell orange in the market, and I have 1,000 oranges in my store, right? Which I've cultivated from the farm, kept them in the store, right? So that I can take them to the market next week. Now, if I decide to take oranges from the store to the market, and I have just 10 baskets, and I have just 5 baskets, and each of the baskets can only take 100 oranges, right? And I have 1,000 oranges, which means I might likely just only take 500 oranges to the market, right? Now, for me to do the all-in technique to prioritize which orange I'll take, remember in 1,000 oranges, there's likelihood of having a very good orange, a bad orange, a very bad orange, and a good orange, right? The all-in technique, if I'm to use the all-in technique to select or to make a choice or prioritize which which orange I should take to the market, our all-in means I will put all the whole 1,000 oranges in all the baskets, right? I'll fill all the baskets with the 1,000 oranges, even though they are full and the basket is about, breaking. I'll fill everything in here. Then I'll begin to take out the oranges that I think are not going to help me make profit, or that are not good, so that I can only have oranges that are very good in the basket, so that I can take them to market and sell them off as fast as possible. So that is what all-in is. Put all the oranges in a basket and begin to take out the ones that you don't need, that are not necessary, that will not allow us to sell them off immediately when we get to the market. That is all-in. Then all-out technique means we exclude all requirements from a start, and then we include the ones that can be implemented without the constraints, without the constraint time schedule. So, still using the example of the oranges, the all-out means instead of having all my oranges in the basket and then removing the ones that are not necessary so that I can meet up with time to sell to my customers, all-out basically tells us that we have all the oranges outside of the basket, so there's no orange in the basket. Then we begin to take the ones that are good and put them inside the basket. That is what the all out technique talks about. So all the requirements are out, then we begin to only select the requirements that are of importance that will help us to meet our time schedule. In, all the requirements are given the same priority, but we now begin to remove the ones that we think are of lesser priority, or should I say lower priority, so that we can only have the ones that are of highest priority that will help us to meet with our deadline. Then the selective is when we select or identify the high priority requirements, and then we now decide to, let's say for instance, we say, okay, through eyeballing, we know the ones that are good requirements. So I put all the good requirements. Okay, it looks like after we've put all the good requirements, we still need all the good oranges. We still need one or two more oranges to add. So we begin to identify oranges that are not bad, but they are manageable, that we can use and add to make up the good requirement and good oranges that we take to the markets in order to meet our deadline to supply to our customers. So that is it about prioritization techniques. I don't know if you have any question before we look at requirement attributes. Michelle?
I don't have.
Okay. Thanks, Ahmad. How about you, Michelle? Is it clear to you, or you have a question somewhere?
Oh, it's clear. It's fine.
Okay. Requirement attributes and documentation format. So we go down to how to ascertain if this is a quality requirement or that if it is a good requirement or not. Requirement attribute helps us to describe the guidelines for evaluating the quality of our requirements when as a business analyst or as a product manager or even as a product owner. So it will help us to evaluate how we characterize or qualify our requirements. And one of the most popular tool or metric or criteria we use to evaluate the quality of requirements is what we call INVEST. INVEST is specifically used for user stories. So we use INVEST technique to measure the quality of our user stories. So when we are writing user stories, we are using the INVEST criteria or the INVEST evaluation tool to measure the quality of our user stories. And INVEST starts with letter I, which is independent, which means our requirements should be independent in a very low level of detail and should not be possible to be separated into components. It means when we write a user story should be independent. It should be in its lowest level of detail and not being able to divide or separate it into a different component. If we can separate it, then we break the user stories and have a different user story and another user story that we broke out of it. But the goal is that when we say this is our user story, it must be in its own low level of detail, which is independent. N stands for negotiable. And what this means is that our user story should be able to provide more room for analysis and discussion. With our user stories, stakeholders should be able to discuss and break down and discuss on, or should I say, analyze how to achieve that user story. So it should create more room for analysis and discussions with stakeholders. Another one is V, which is valuable. Our user stories should represent value. And that is because whatever thing we are doing as business analysts in a project, or the solution we are building rather, must be a solution that delivers value to stakeholders. And how we deliver value is from the requirements we write. The user stories we are writing must be a representation of a value. That is why you can have a user story that does not communicate a certain proportion of value to your stakeholders. So the user story must be a representation of value to your stakeholder needs. And then we have the E, estimable. And what this means is that stakeholders should be able to estimate how long, that is the duration with which it will take them to implement that particular user story. So stakeholders should be able to estimate or should I say break down the user stories on into subtasks to be able to come up with a time duration that it will take to implement, or the amount of effort that will be required to implement that particular user story. And for letter S is small. What it means is that your user story should be small, it should not be so big, and it should be easy to prioritize. It should be easy to plan. It should be easy to break down into subtasks within its own level of accuracy. And the last one is that your user story should be testable, which means you should be able to come up with acceptance criteria that can be used to validate the functionality, or should I say the usability of that particular user story. So testers or QAs should be able to test your user stories to see that it is well implemented. So it should be testable. These are the criteria we use, or should I say attributes we use to measure the quality of a user story. So when if I'm your team lead in a project and you write user stories and give to me to review, I'm not just going to look at you that you've written user stories. I'm going to ensure that the user story you have written is independent, is valuable, is negotiable, is estimable, and is testable, and also small. So these are the things we consider whenever we are writing a user story. When you write a user story, you take time and look at it to see, okay, is this user story negotiable? Is it valuable? Is it going to add value to stakeholders when we implement this particular user story? Another metric, or should I say tool, that we use to evaluate the attributes, the quality of a requirement, is what we call the TACUPT. The TACUPT is also common, and it's cut across all types of requirement specifications. For the inverse is specifically for user stories, but the TACUPT works for different types of requirements. So the TACUPT involves your requirement being testable, atomic, complete, uniquely identifiable, traceable, prioritized, consistent, and unambiguous. So this is a way we use to evaluate requirements in general, right? Whether it is a use case scenario or a high-level requirement you're writing, whatever, right? We use the TACUPT to evaluate them. And your TACUPT can basically be evaluated. It can be used to evaluate requirements such as your acceptance criteria, your non-functional requirements, and your use case specification. So let's take examples of good and bad requirements using TACUPT, right? How we evaluate a good or bad requirement using TACUPT, and using an e-learning portal or e-learning enrollment solution as an example. So let's consider an e-learning enrollment solution that allows local and international students to register on the portal, professors or lecturers to log in or sign up or register on the portal as well. Students to select courses they're going to write, and also the duration of their course. So let's take a look at first one, which is atomic, a requirement being atomic, which is part of the component of the TACUPT. So a requirement being atomic means that your requirement should be at a very low level of detail, and it should not be possible to be separated out into different components. Let's take an example of this requirement. Students will be able to enroll to undergraduate and postgraduate courses. Now, in some level, you can consider this requirement to be fine, right? But the thing is that it's not as atomic as possible, because we're talking about two types of courses. that are available to students. So a good way to represent this requirement would be that students will be able to enroll to undergraduate courses. That will be a standalone requirement on its own. Then you have another requirement that will say students will be able to enroll to postgraduate courses. So in this way, you have your requirements as atomic as possible, and there's no possibility of separating them out into different requirements. Now you say, okay, since I've written this requirement this way, I guess I've written a very wonderful requirement documentation, and I need to submit. But when you go further again to look at other components of TACUPT, right, such as uniquely identifiable, you realize that the requirement you just wrote in this place, the requirement you just wrote that you felt is atomic and it satisfies everything about a good requirement is not sufficient. You need to now uniquely identify your requirement by saying, writing, giving them a different ID numbers and saying, one, students will be able to enroll to undergraduate studies, and then two, students will be able to enroll to postgraduate studies. So now you have two requirements. Requirement one is that students enrolls to undergraduate. Requirement two is that students enrolls to postgraduate. And you now feel like, okay, my requirements are uniquely identifiable and they are atomic, then I have a perfect requirement. But no, you still have to go further to ensure that your requirements are perfectly identifiable as it ought to be. So you say, okay, let's have an epic called courses. So in my requirements, there's a section in the requirements that I want to talk about courses. That section is section 1. Now, section 1.1 or requirements 1.1 is that students will be able to enroll to undergraduate studies. Section 1.2 is that students will be able to enroll to postgraduate courses or studies. What this basically means is that I can tell people that I can tell anyone in the team and say, let us please refer to section 1 in my business requirement document. In that section 1, I captured how students should be able to enroll for courses in 1.1 and 1.2. Or I can say, okay, since we are talking about enrollments into undergraduate courses, please refer to section 1.1 in my business requirement document. And in that way, you've been able to uniquely identify your requirements as a business analyst so that stakeholders will know how to relate or trace your requirements. Another one is that your requirement needs to be complete. What do I mean by complete? A bad requirement is this. A professor user would log into the system by providing his username, password, and other relevant information. Now, the question will be, what do you consider to be the other relevant information? So I'd like both of you, Ahmad and Michelle, if you are the engineer or the technical person that will need to implement this requirement from a business analyst, what will you consider to be the other relevant information?
It is very, very vague, and it's subject to many interpretations. It may be name, it may be surname.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you yourself, assuming you are the engineer and I just send you this requirement and you are pressed with time to implement it right away, what would you just assume to be other relevant information so you can go ahead with the implementation?
I may choose staff number.
Staff number, thank you. How about you, Mitchell? Michelle, can you hear me? Hello, Michelle. Is Michelle still on call? Hello? Okay, so just as you said, it's very, very vague, right? And anyone can make an assumption on behalf of the business analyst when implementing this, right? So it is said that this requirement is not complete and it's not concise. And that is how most people write requirements, right? That's how most people write requirements. Whenever we're writing requirements as a business analyst, we need to ensure that our requirement is complete and it is concise, and it does not create room for assumptions, right? So a good requirement would be that a professor user will log into the system by providing his username, password, and department code, or maybe providing his username, password, and staff ID. So you must ensure that you are concise in your requirement as a business analyst, and you don't allow stakeholders to start making assumptions when they are implementing your requirement. So it's good for you to evaluate your requirement based on it being complete and concise. Another criteria we use is traceable. You should be able to make your requirements traceable. For instance, you are talking about a requirement you wrote in your BRD, and you are writing your FRD, and you want to relate it to a requirement that was written in your BRD. You won't just say that let's say sign up, for instance. You won't say the sign up feature has been explained in the BRD. Please refer to the BRD document, the BRD for more explanation on the sign up feature. No, you won't do that. You have to be able to provide a traceability to that particular requirement in your BRD. So assuming the sign up feature has a unique identification of HLR 003. So in HLR 003, that was where you kind of stated your sign up feature requirement. If you want to trace it, if you want to perform that traceability, you basically tell stakeholders that they should maintain the sign up feature or maintain student information as mapped to BRD requirements, BRD HLR 003. So in that way, you've provided a very good traceability for stakeholders. They can refer to that requirement without having to beat around the bush. They can directly go and search for that particular requirement ID to get clarity on the requirements you are trying to explain to them. Another one is that your requirement needs to be prioritized. You can't write a requirement without a prioritization on them. And we just spent like 30 minutes or thereabout to talk about requirement prioritization. So I won't go further to talk about it here. And then the next one is that your requirement should be consistent and unambiguous. When you create ambiguity to your stakeholders, you are causing a very big problem. You are creating a very big problem because you're making room for assumption and you're making room for confusion as well. So when you write a requirement like a student will have either undergraduate courses or postgraduate courses, but not both. Now you've said that they will have undergraduate courses or they will have either undergraduate or postgraduate, and they can't have both. Assuming you've stated this requirement somewhere, and then in the course of the documentation, you now write another requirement that says that some courses will be open or available to both undergraduate and postgraduate students. What you're basically doing is that you are creating confusion and you are not consistent. In the sense that you've said before that a student can have both undergraduate and postgraduate courses. And now you're saying that some courses will be available to both undergraduate and postgraduate students. So you're creating confusion and ambiguity. So we need to ensure that as you review your requirements that you have written, that there's no form of ambiguity or confusion that you have created in the course of writing your requirements. You also need to ensure that you are consistent with your terminology. If in this place you use student, and then you are talking about the same user and you're using candidates, and you want to represent the same user, you're still using customer, it means you are not consistent in your use of terminology. So you have to ensure that you are consistent in both terminology, in both the line of thoughts or opinion you are expressing in your requirements. And the last one is that your requirements must be testable. Your requirements must be testable. And you need to ensure that the requirements you are writing are testable against some given criteria. An example is this. If I say to you that each page of the system will load in an acceptable time frame, what do you think I'm referring to as an acceptable time frame. What would be your guess or what I'm saying to mean? What do you think I mean by acceptable time frame? What time frame is acceptable to me?
It is subject to assumption. I may say 1 week, someone else may say 1 month, another may say 6 months.
Okay, thank you. So it basically means that I'm creating room for inconsistent, it means this requirement is not complete. And two, if the software tester wants to test the system, he or she doesn't know the time frame to test it, isn't it? So we need to ensure that our requirements are testable. And here's an example of a good requirement. Register students and control and enroll courses page of the system would load within 5 seconds. What it means is that if a software tester, that's QA, if they pick up the if they're trying to test the registration page and course enrollment pages, when they click on those pages and they don't load within 5 seconds, it means that the implementation failed, right? So they have a criteria. They have something to use to test their to carry out their test. And that is why your requirements needs to be testable. Now that brings us to the last section of the class of today, which is documentation format. I don't know if you have any question. Let me check if Michelle is still on call. I don't know if you have any question.
None at the moment. Sorry,
okay.
From my hand, from my hand, I just want to make an assumption, and I want to know from you, Genesis, if the assumption is right. Can I conclude that it will be better to combine both invest and the TACOP techniques in order to have a better requirements documentation?
I want to say you should combine. Reason being that in this TACOP, the only thing that is not present in this TACOP is the valuable aspect, right? That we have in invest.
Yeah.
But the thing is that invest is unique to the user story.
Stories.
You understand? Yes. Okay. Invest is unique to user stories. It's specifically for your user stories. But for TACOP, you can basically apply it across different types of requirements. Specifications that you have. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So let's go ahead to documentation formats. The formats we document our requirements. So number one is the business requirements document, BRD. This is basically written to define the requirement of a business process or the requirement of a system that needs to support a particular business process. The BRD contains the business requirements that are to be met and fulfilled by that particular solution under development. The business requirement specifies what the solution must do in order to fulfill the requirements of stakeholders. And then the next documentation format is FRD, Functional Requirements Document. The functional requirement document defines how the solution would accomplish the business requirements by outlining the functionality and also the features that will be supported by that particular solution. The functional requirement document needs to be well detailed in order to ensure that it provides sufficient clarity to the technical team for proper implementation. Another documentation format that we use is the SRS, Software Requirement Specification. A software requirement specification, although is no more commonly required of business analysts, is a description of an organization's understanding of the customer or potential client's solution requirements and dependencies that are involved. Is its initial purpose is to ensure that the client, or should I say the provider, understands the customer or the client's requirements before actually commencing the design and development of that solution. The SRS kind of provides clarity on the precise and explicit language of the functionalities and capabilities, as well as the constraints for that particular solution. SRS functions as a blueprint for completing a project with as little cost growth as possible, or as little effect in cost as possible. Another documentation format we have is the epic and the user story. The epic and the user stories are used to document requirements from the customer's perspective by ensuring that the requirement represents the activity to be performed and the value the customer wants to achieve from that particular requirement. Another one we also have is the use case specification, but that comes inside the functional requirements. Now, let's take a look at a sample BRD and FRD. Let me share my entire screen so that we can see a sample BRD and FRD. Let me know where you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Sorry, let my Word document load. I don't know why it's taking time to load. Okay, yeah. You can see the Word document, right? So let's take a look at this business requirement document for a loan origination solution, right? So this is a typical example of a BRD document, how it is. So we are looking at a solution which is the loan origination solution. So we have the logo of the company that owns the solution, business requirement document for loan origination solution, the version prepared for Uptrust Limited, prepared by Uptrust Consulting, the dates. Then we have the document information section where you talk about the owner of the documents, the reference material for these documents, talk about the document revision history, the current version, what is the detail of the current version, who authored it, and probably signature and date of that current version. Then we have the document approval. Remember, I told you before about talking about business analysis governance. So whoever has the authority to approve your work, is their names will come in this section, right? Also, in terms of review, whoever reviews the work and you make changes, you have to create a new version and provide details on what the change is under the details section. Now, after that, you go to the table of contents where you have a table of contents, and then you now go into the main document itself. So we have introduction. Under introduction, that's inside the section of introduction, we have the purpose of the document, which is the purpose of the BRD. You don't assume that everybody should know what the purpose of this BRD document is, right? I just gave a little description of the purpose of the document for the purpose of learning here. So the purpose is to outline the stakeholder requirement that satisfies the business objectives and the scope of work for the implementation of a loan origination solution, LOS, for Uptrust Consulting, right? The document captures the requirements from the business angle, explaining the needed features that would enable the proposed solution to achieve its expected business value. Now, by the time you've defined the purpose, you also need to define the solution that the BRD is referring to. So the LOS is this and this, which would enable small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, to apply to loan facility for their business need. The solution will be designed to cater for loan requests down to loan disbursement and loan performance reporting. The solution will be accessible on all devices and will be built in such a manner that it is easily integrated with third-party systems. The LOS, which is the loan origination solution, will also ride on an advanced machine learning algorithm to perform predictive analysis and credit management on loan requests for an efficient loan processing, right? Then we have the intended audience. That is for these documents, which audience are you sending these documents to? It's going to be the development team and also the client or the product team. Now, then we have the current situation, which is the current business process for loan management. That's for loan origination in Uptrust. So Uptrust currently does not have a loan origination process or business. So you can see there's currently there's no current process or current solution scenario available. But in a situation whereby maybe you are trying to build a loan origination solution for maybe a microfinance bank, which at the moment issues loan facility to their customers, but they want a technological angle to it. They need an automation to it. So in that way, in that scenario, you will capture their current loan process in this section, which is the current situation. Now, 1.5, we talk about the envision, which is the LOS that we want to build. 1.6, we talk about what is in scope, right? That is the scope of project. It is going to be user-friendly, highly secure, end-to-end, easy to use, robust load performance reporting, audit trail. Talk about the scope. What do we consider as implementation scope for this project? And then what do we consider as out of scope, right? So you can say anything that is outside the above outlined scope will be considered out of scope. In section 2, we start looking at attributes of the solution itself. What are the various performance metrics and critical success factors what to consider for this particular solution? Number one is availability of the solution. And how we measure availability is that the system should be available at least 99.9 or 99.5% of the time. The solution, another success factor could be that the solution should be user-friendly, with good user experience and responsive on all platforms. And how we measure this is that there should be a reduced time for users to complete a task, right? And there should be a high success rate with 0 bugs and errors. Another way we also measure this is that the solution should maintain the same quality on both web and mobile platform without loss of data. That's another way we measure user experience, user friendliness, and responsiveness as well. You can come up with another critical success factor that the solution should be highly secure, which means you can measure this by saying the website or the platform must be secured and not prone to cyber attack. Another one is ease of integration, another success factor, and you come up with a performance measure that you can use to measure that particular success factor. So you can have as many success factors and the various performance measures you want to use to measure them. Section 3, you look at the ownership of the process. So who owns the loan origination process? It is going to be Uptrust Consulting. If we are doing this project for a microfinance bank, the process will be owned by that particular microfinance bank. Key control, which is basically how we're going to control the project. So we have quality assurance to ensure that there's quality, and also we'll perform user acceptance tests before we actually go live. Now, section 5 is now where it now gets interesting, because that's where you now begin to document your stakeholder requirements. So you look at the actors and the functions. When you talk about actors, you are referring to users. So users and their functions. So you should be able to identify who are the various actors or users that will be using the system. So we have the super admin. What will be his function or responsibility? To log in and log out, to configure the system, to manage users, to view the audit trail, to update the system, and to manage loan. Then we have the borrowers. What will be their function or the solution? To create an account, to log in and log out, to request for a loan, to view their dashboard, and to reset a password. We have the loan approvals who goes ahead to approve the loan, review the loan, decline the loan request, log in and log out. Then section 5.2 is now where you now state the key features of that loan origination solution. So it's going to have a user onboarding feature where they can create an account and log in. There's also going to be a loan application module where they can request for a loan and also view details of their loan. There'll be a loan processing module where they can perform risk assessment and credit assessments. There'll be a loan approval feature where they can do like a maker checker to approve a loan request. There'll be a loan disbursement feature or module where we can go into the system to disburse a loan. There'll be a loan reporting module where we can look at loan performance and impact reporting. There'll also be also a system configuration feature or module, user management, audit trail, and notification. Then 5.3 is now where we talk about the high level requirements, HLR. So we basically capture the requirement on how the stakeholders want the system to function, right? In this section. So remember, we talked about the requirement being uniquely identifiable. So you have an ID. Also talk about priority as well. Your requirement being prioritized. You have a priority column and you have a description column. So LOS HLR 001. You talk about the requirements. Borrower should be able to register on the system by providing this, and this. Next one, LOS HLR 002. You describe the requirements for that. So you describe all of the requirements that you have been able to gather, the high-level requirements from stakeholders. You describe each and every one of them, ensure that they are uniquely identified with their own priority assigned to them. By the time you finish describing that, you go to section 6, where you talk about the risks, assumptions, and the dependencies. In your risks, you outline all the project risks, or probably the business risks or resource risks that are involved. You also capture the assumptions that you want to make to ensure that the solution goes as smooth as possible. And then if there are any dependencies, you also outline those dependencies. So this is a sample BRD, business requirement document, for a loan origination solution, right? So this is how a BRD basically looks like. Let's take a look at an FRD, which is a functional requirement solution for the same functional requirement document for the same loan origination solution. We just looked at the BRD. So let's start. You still have the same preliminary pages for document information, revision history, document approval. Then you have a table of contents, and then you go into the main document itself by saying the introduction, where you introduce the solution, because now your BRD, your audience, or you are speaking to business stakeholders. That is why you will not see any technical information. You don't see so much technical information or any technical information in your BRD, because your audience are basically business-minded stakeholders. But your FRD, you are now speaking to your technical stakeholders. So like your software engineers, your QAs, and all of that. But you need to know that you have not told them you've not explained the solution to them. So you need to start your FRD with introduction to introduce the solution to them. Then the purpose of this FRD document, the objective of the solution you want them to build, because you want them to build a loan origination solution. So what is the objective of the solution? You state out the objectives of the solution, and then you also state out the scope of the solution that you want the technical team to implement, then the success criteria for the solution, the various user group, that's who are those that will be using the system. Then for those that will be using this system, what will be their function? And in your BRD that you have documented, that function, you've been able to explain that function at a high level in your BRD. So you link the requirements from your BRD on your FRD. So this is traceability. Now, you talk about that, then you go over to look at your various user groups. Which features or module are they going to be using on the solution? So the borrowers will be using the onboarding module, the apply module, and the applicant, the dashboard module for applicants. While the approvers will be using the loan management module, dashboard module, and reporting module. Your super admin will be using the loan management module, reporting module, user management, system configuration, and the audit trail module. Then you talk about dependencies for the projects. Then you go into your context diagram to draw a context diagram that explains how the loan origination solution would interact with external entities. Which you realize in your BRD, there was no context diagram there. Then after that, you draw your use case diagram that would show the user the interaction between actors and the system and the solution. So the different actors, or should I say user groups that you identify, how are they going to interact with the system? You draw a use case diagram to represent that, and then you have your process flow diagram, the high-level process flow diagram, which would explain the end-to-end process for loan origination. And then you go into your functional requirements, where you begin to state each of the functional requirements for the general system, and also ensure you assign a requirement ID to them. So this is REQ 001, what it is, REQ 002. So for these, you're not prioritizing at this stage, at this point in time, because you've already done your prioritization in your BRD. Then you talk about each of the modules that are involved, or each of the modules that are going to be implemented, and you give their specific requirements. So this is the onboarding module, the requirement ID. So FS stands for functional specification, OM stands for onboarding module, 001 stands for number 1. The user group is borrower. Requirement description is that the ability to create accounts on the system with the following credentials. So you list it out. Then you go to the next one, FSOM 002. You state the requirements. FSOM 003, you state all of the requirements that are involved, especially for onboarding module. Then you come over to now state the business rules. Business rules are like acceptance criteria. What we use to evaluate the requirements, what we're going to use to test the requirements you have just written. So upon creating an account, the borrower automatically accepts our terms and conditions. Password characters should include uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and must not be less than 6 characters and not more than 10 characters. So you explain all of these requirements for each of the modules. So you do for onboarding module, you do for apply module, you do for the borrower dashboard module. You also do for each of the modules that you have identified in previous sections of your documentation. For the admin reporting module, you do for each and every one of them. So I'm going to share this document with you guys so that you have a copy of it. By the time you're done with your functional requirements, you now talk about your non-functional requirements. It's like your communication interface, your security requirements, and all of that. By the time you finish preparing this, you have a very well-detailed functional requirement document, which you can share with your technical team so that they can use it to break down the work they need to do and start implementation. I don't know if you have any question or whatsoever related to the documentation format I just walked you guys through.
Thank you, Genesis, for that beautiful presentation. I noticed one thing between BRD and FRD. In the BRD, when you listed the actors, you did not include level 2 approval. Whereas in the FRD, you did include it. Is there any particular reason for that?
No, no particular reason, but it's just for the sake of the fact that I'm trying to be much more detailed in my FRD.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's my question.
You're welcome. All right. Mitchell, do you have any question?
No.
All right. So that basically is it about requiring